is what we utilize for this program to really help folks understand their leadership capabilities and strengths. And so as we go through these this webinar today, we'll be talking about that. And so just to start, when we launched this, and given that many of us are halfway through the program, there's a lot of conversation around the topic of leadership. And we each have our own kind of individual biases or thoughts in terms of what leadership looks like for us. And so I wanted to start off and open it up with a question. When you think of a leader, what are characteristics that you use to define a leader? So if you can just put those on the chat box, a couple attributes that you think of. Can anyone see the chat box? So we have empowers others, influencer, visionary. We'll take a couple more. Compassion, empathy, motivator, generous, commitment, risk taker, executive. Thank you. Wonderful. And if I were to ask you, what are some characteristics of, thank you, Annalisa, we have transparency, trusted. And when you think of a woman or a Latina leader, what are some top leadership traits or capabilities that you think of that come to mind? We also have risk taker. Wonderful. Caring. Any others? Awareness and cultural sensitivity, around cultural sensitivity. Wonderful. Breaking the glass ceiling. And usually when we have a conversation around Latina leaders in particular, we see new and different attributes that come up, and around the different cultural leverage that we have. Wonderful. So we'll move on, and we bring that up to have a conversation, but also to think of your own individual leadership styles and capabilities. One of the studies that's utilized for this first program is a research done by Santa Clara University that talks about the evolution of leadership, but also comes up with several key characteristics in terms of what defines a leader. And we have a list that, if you have not received, we can provide to you, that has a list of about 25 to 30 characteristics, but these are some of the top ones that are outlined here on the screen for you, in terms of honesty, being inspirational, broad-minded, which is also characteristic or defined, or I should say aligns with, in terms of having cultural sensitivity, being inclusive leader, which was mentioned in terms of an attribute for Latinas in particular, being competent, intelligence in terms of what your role is, and being able to be creative and imaginative. Other attributes that are included on that list are forward-looking, fair-minded, which I think aligns also with being able to relate and be open and be inclusive. Courageousness, similar to being able to take risks and being forward-looking as well. And again, as we look, we can share that list with you as well. So I want to take a couple minutes and ask you to take a personal inventory. And I think at this point, having had taken the insights assessment, you probably have a much better sense in terms of what abilities you have to be able to influence others, and to engage others and really function as a leader in your community and in the workplace. So think about which of these qualities that we mentioned you possess, and what are some qualities that you need to develop. And again, as the more aware you become in terms of what are the ones that you possess and ones that you want to develop, you want to look to your colleagues in the Mujeres HACE program and also outside and within HACE in general, and see attributes that others may have that are potential qualities that you want to work on. So we encourage you to connect with that person, meet for lunch, but also just being able to observe is a key way to be able to learn it and see how they do it. And again, you want to be authentic to who you are and the attributes that you have. Moving forward, here's also a couple other attributes in taking personal inventory. And lastly, the leadership principles. One, first and foremost, is being able to understand yourself. Being self-aware is key, and it's really the first step to becoming an effective leader. And move on to being able to set the example and develop that sense of responsibility with your colleagues. And on the next slide, it shows a couple more steps on what that looks like. And again, these are what we share as the key to leadership effectiveness. And one is what we're doing here today, and which is what you're doing in the Mujeres HACE program, is really exploring and discovering your own strengths. Because then once you understand that and understand the different type of color energies and preferences that other folks have, it makes it a lot easier to be able to recognize and appreciate others, understand what are their capabilities and how to leverage them to ensure that they succeed, but also help you succeed as well. And along the way, being able to adapt. If you understand that perhaps you're not into the details or a numbers cruncher, but you have a colleague that's a strength that they have, how do you learn how to work with that individual to help ensure the success of the organization, and adapting along the way to becoming an effective colleague and communicator, and continuously assessing and taking into action along the way. So these are the key steps that we like to emphasize throughout the entire program, but first and foremost, opening up the program, the Mujeres HACE program, with this kind of key understanding and overview. And so we'll move on to the next slide, and I want you to take a look at it, because we're talking a lot about that self-discovery piece, and the biggest piece is understanding perception and the power of perception. So that being said, I'll ask you to take a look at this screen, and you may or may not have seen this in the past, but what do you see there? Can you please type it in the chat box? Do you see an elderly woman or a young lady? So we have Sophia, who says both. Okay, Rhonda says both. Patricia Tijerina, young lady. Young lady. Maria. Does anybody just see the elderly women? Alrighty. So we have both. Oops, sorry. So here I'm going to use my mouse. So for those of you who may see one or the other, here we have the bonnet, or the forehead of the elderly woman, her nose. Oops. Screen's going back. My mouse is going crazy here. And then she has a feather in her hat here. So for those of you who saw the young lady only, do you now see the older woman? And then the younger lady, you see her chin here, eyelash, her nose. She has like a bonnet, and then the feather. And we merely just show this as an example of how quickly we jump to making a judgment or perception, whether it be in the workplace, whether it be in your own relationships. But it's just, you know, we are each unique and we each see the world differently from the way that others see it. And this unique view is perceived by your own individual perceptions, beliefs, and if you can understand where your own individual perceptions and beliefs come from, then that's where we begin to understand why people see things differently. And then once you understand that and about people, you begin to appreciate, you know, who they are, and in return, be able to improve relationships that we have with them. And believe it or not, the ladder of perception, we break it down here into various steps, and because we all don't see things the same way, we all don't respond the same way. How many times have you been in a work situation where perhaps you made a value judgment on someone's working style because you didn't understand that they maybe had something going on at home, or different working preferences? You know, I think for me individually, one of my own experiences early on was having the perception that getting the work done and really focusing on my work, going into the office, going straight to the desk and getting everything done and going home was going to make me successful. But one of the things that others perceived of me was that I didn't care for others or care to communicate or have relationships. And that was not the case. It was just I was entirely focused on work. And it wasn't until someone was able to share that with me and say, hey, during a lunch outing, and share with me that they thought that, you know, that I was a really good friend, and they seemed to be surprised about that, but honestly it's because I didn't take the time to develop that relationship with them. And I was fortunate enough to have someone make me aware of that early on, because I was giving off a bad perception that was not accurate. And it's much easier to give the right perception than to turn something out that may have been negative in that case. But we all have biases, and again, they're all based on experiences that we've may had. And here you see the different steps that it takes to make that judgment. So the events, as in a situation that you may see, whether it's something happening in the street or something in the workplace that's going on, as you would capture it. The perception, so what is the selected data that you are gathering from that? In turn, you make value judgments, perhaps of that individual's value judgments, which in turn makes you go on and give interpretations and meanings. You draw up logical conclusions, and you have an emotional and physical response. Either you are angry, or you become flustered, or you're ignoring an individual for some reason or another. And in turn, beliefs are formed, and then actions that you may or may not regret are taken as a result. So I'll stop here, and I'll share an example that goes through these different steps, but I'll ask you, has there ever been a time, either with relationships or in the workplace, where you made a certain perception or judgment, and it turned out to be not the case entirely? Anybody have anything to share? So let me share this story. And it's a poem. You can look it up. It's called The Cookie Thief. But it really talks about how wrong we can be about some perceptions that we make for some reason or another. Waiting for it to pull up. Alrighty. So if I have your attention, and it's called The Cookie Thief, you can look it up. It says, a woman was waiting at an airport one night with several long hours before her flight. She hunted for a book in the airport shops, bought a bag of cookies, and found a place to drop. She was engrossed in her book, but happened to see that the man sitting beside her, as bold as could be, grabbed a cookie or two from the bag in between, which she tried to ignore to avoid a scene. So she munched on her cookies and watched the clock as the gutsy cookie thief diminished her stock. She was getting more irritated as the minutes ticked by, thinking, if I wasn't so nice, I'd blacken his eye. With each cookie she took, he took one too. When only one was left, she wondered what would he do. With a smile on his face and a nervous laugh, he took the last cookie and broke it in half. He offered her half as he ate the other. She snatched it from him and thought, oh, brother, this guy has some nerve and he's also rude. Why he didn't even show any gratitude. She had never known when she had been so galled, and sighed with relief when her flight was called. She gathered her belongings and headed to the gate, refusing to look back at the thieving ingrate. She boarded the plane and sank in her seat. Then she sought her book, which was almost complete. As she reached in her baggage, she gasped with surprise. There was her bag of cookies in front of her eyes. If mine are here, she moaned in despair. The others were his, and he tried to share. Too late to apologize, she realized with grief that she was the rude one, the ingrate, the thief. So how often were you obviously or absolutely convinced of something only to realize that you were mistaken? I like to share that poem because it shows a clear example in terms of how quickly we climb the ladder of perception and form beliefs and take actions without realizing the other situation, the other individual, where they may be coming from, or perhaps their preference. So I'll ask one more time and see if anybody has anything to share, and if not, we will move on. Perfect. Alrighty, so we are going to spend now the bulk of the rest of the webinar talking and leading towards attributes that you may have. So here you see different descriptors. So just take a couple minutes, and if you have a pen and paper, write down or note what are top 5 to 10 attributes from this list that you have. All right. Once you have 5 to 10 or so, next to, so this is getting us closer to what your energy preferences are. Just add the number of words you have circled in each color, whether it's the blue color energy, green, yellow, red. For the most part, we will have top 2 to 3 dominant color energies that will align with our top selections here. Okay. And take another moment here to think of what are the words that you can think of that describe your key characteristics that may not be listed here. Alrighty, and since all of us have had a chance to see our discovery assessment, I think we for the most part have a good sense in terms of what are our top color energies. And we talk a lot about the insights discovery, and it was derived from famous psychologist Carl Jung, who developed the key concepts that are developed in the insights discovery in terms of talking about the top color energy preferences and where individuals have, in terms of a whole, we each have the four color energies within us. It's the combination of the four energies that creates the unique you. I do want to emphasize that no one is a blue person or a red person or green. Typically, the language that we are suggesting are as an individual with the dominance for a fiery red energy, or an individual with a dominance for or preference for sunshine yellow. So just want to make sure that we clarify that as you know, you're meeting with your colleagues in the program as well. We don't want to call anyone, you know, red, yellow, blue, or green. And again, just want to emphasize that we each have all of the four color energies. We just have a preference for a few others than maybe one or two versus the rest of them. And again, it's the combination that makes us unique. And so when you look at your individual insights profile assessments, you notice that it talks a lot about the different attitudes. And I'm going to walk you through the three different type of attitudes that you see that are being described in your assessment tool. One are the introversion, extroversion attitudes. So these are the way that we have a tendency to react to situations. Whether you have energy preference for the introversion color energies, then you will lean more on the left side of this scale. Or if you have a combination, you may be somewhere in between. It just depends on the situation. Whether you are in a work meeting and you prefer to be more on the quiet side, think about this, well, you know, what is being discussed, and come back later with your suggestions or ideas, then you will lean on more on the introversion side of the scale. And you'll notice that in some of the descriptors and in your profile assessment. Or, you know, you may choose to be more on the talkative side, be more involved, and talkative and with others in that meeting. So again, the introversion, extroversion is how you may react to any situation, whether it's a group of individuals in or outside of the space. The second function, other than how you react, is how you choose to make decisions. Now, some of us have a tendency to make decisions, whether at home or at work, on either end of the scale, more on how we feel about the situation versus looking at all of the facts. I need all of the details, I need the numbers, I need, before I make any decision. Some of us have a tendency to say, you know, I feel good about it, let's move forward. Nothing, again, wrong with one end or the other. It's, again, having that awareness, whether where you fall under, but also where others may fall under, and learning how to create more of that working environment that works for everyone. Okay, so we have the attitudes, which are how you react to situations, and then we have the decision-making functions, which is making decisions based off of facts versus how you feel. The third and the final function that is also incorporated in your assessment is perceiving functions. Now, these can be a little bit more confusing. One example that I like to share and is when you look at you know, two horses running on the sunset. What are the immediate thoughts that come to your mind? And I'm asking, so feel free to. Wish I would have had a picture. So, for example, if you have two horses that run in a sunset in a nice background out in the country, we have some folks that may react and say, and we say, what do you see in this picture? And they see, oh, joy, happiness, freedom. And that's more reacting with your intuition. So on the right side, being more imaginative, abstract, versus we have folks that I ask them, what do you see in this picture? And they say, I see two horses and a sunset. That's more sensation. So more specific, it's more practical. It's kind of like, this is what I see. So again, this third and final function can be a little bit more confusing, but you'll see some of these descriptors that tell you where you fall in terms of your own personal preferences on the insights discovery. All right, so we have Maria who said freedom, so she's on our intuition sensing function. So again, this could be a little confusing, but we'll talk a little bit more in terms of where these functions fall on the color wheel. So on the first day, we spent some time on a color wheel on a floor mat where folks would go. We would walk through these different color energy preferences, and all of us know where we fall on here, and these are simply to showcase that we all have color energy preferences for 1, 2, or 3 versus the others on both individually in the workplace and at home. So here we have, I'll start off with our fiery red. So individuals who have a high dominance for fiery red energy are active, are usually in a firm direction, have a strong determination, are determined in their focus, and very results-oriented, very direct to the point, seek specific and tangible outcomes. Are folks who have a high energy preference for sunshine yellow. These are individuals who enjoy networking events, enjoy working in teams and working with others, usually extremely enthusiastic. What are some examples of folks that you would think, whether it's yourself or folks in the public eye, that have a high energy preference of sunshine yellow? I think of an Ellen DeGeneres, for example. Like, you can tell right away, may not know her individually, but if you've ever watched her show, I think you can tell right away that she has a high energy preference for the sunshine yellow. Moving on to our earth green. So individuals who have a high energy preference for earth green usually view the world through what they value and what is important to them. Always seeking harmony and meaningful relationships. They defend what they value with determination, quiet determination and persistence. They prefer democratic approaches that respect the individual. And these are the individuals that are always seeking to hear everyone's ideas and opinions before making any decisions. So if they're leading a team, anyone's missing in terms of their input, they'll make sure to include them. So extremely inclusive. I think one of the individuals that I think of when you look at someone that has a high energy preference for earth green is like a Mother Teresa, extremely caring about others and really puts everyone else in front of them. Any other folks that you can think of that have an earth green, feel free to write them in the chat box or think of them to yourselves. Alrighty, and then we have Michelle Obama. Anybody else for earth green? We have two folks, Michelle. Especially with, I would think, in my opinion, with our First Lady, the work that she's doing to prevent obesity in our youth, ensure healthy eating. I see a lot of her utilizing a lot of her earth green energy for that too. And then lastly, our fourth color energy preference here is our cool blue. These are individuals who have a high preference for a cool blue approach, usually have a strong desire to understand the world around them more in terms of the details. So your number crunchers, analysts, they maintain a detached and objective standpoint. They really like to think things through before making any decisions and committing to any action. They're extremely accurate, prefer to be extremely accurate. They need strategy and really need to understand that everything is clear and concise before proceeding. And again, it's good to be aware if you have someone, whether it's yourself or a colleague, that has a preference for that. You want to understand how to approach them and make sure that when you're working with them that you have all of your facts and your details together, because they would be questioning you in terms of why you're pushing a certain decision or suggestion. Now, these are all positive attributes. Not one is better than the other. I think it's important to have an awareness of all of them. And when folks that have a high energy preference for any of these areas are under stress, sometimes we may not have so much of a positive attribute. So here I'm going to flip as to when individuals that have a high energy preference for fiery red energy may come off as when they're under a stressful situation. And you see some attributes here. So the positive attributes would turn into being more of an aggressive, overbearing, intolerance. Our sunshine yellow may become a bit hasty and frantic. And again, these are all under stressful situations. Folks with the green, earth green preference may become stubborn and kind of removed, and folks with the cool blue becoming a little stuffy, indecisive, and reserved. So it's important to understand that if it's yourself, when you're negative, if you're under a stressful situation, understanding if you may be exhibiting any of these attributes in the workplace, for example. So I'll switch back to the positive, and we just talked about the attitude. So folks that have a tendency to make decisions based on facts fall on the top of the wheel. Again, so thinking versus feeling. Folks that have a tendency to make decisions on how they feel on a decision, they're on the bottom of the wheel, or have a high energy preference for any of these on the bottom of the wheel. We may have folks, and again, so I'll repeat that. Folks that have a tendency to make decisions based on the facts fall on the top of the wheel. They either have a high energy preference for red or cool blue. Folks that tend to make decisions based on how they feel have a high energy preference for earth green or sunshine yellow. Folks that tend to react to situations more on the extroversion versus introversion fall on the right side of the wheel. Folks that have a tendency to react their attitudes to any situation based on introversion fall on the left side of the wheel. And you may have a combination of both. And sensing and intuition, it's all over on the wheel. And again, that can be a little bit more confusing. Alrighty. I'll stop there and see if there are any questions on what we just reviewed here on the color energy. Okay. So I'll say one more thing before we move on these color energy preferences, just to emphasize and help you understand, and especially this is extremely helpful when you're working with others. Folks that have a high energy preference for fiery red, in terms of appearance, right? There's other ways to figure out, like how do you figure out, you know, in your surroundings where folks may fall under and how to communicate with the individual. Folks with a high energy preference for red appear more of a business-like, functional type of an appearance. Their primary focus is results. Usually they like you to be brief. So if you have be brief, be bold, be gone. And decisions are typically pragmatic for individuals who have a high energy preference for red. For folks that have a high energy preference for sunshine yellow, usually in terms of appearances, they're more informal, outgoing, and their primary focus is interaction with others. Like you to be engaging, their fear, disapproval, and decisions can be sometimes spontaneous for individuals that have a high energy preference for sunshine yellow. For our folks that have an energy preference to earth green, usually appear casual, conforming, and their primary focus is maintaining harmony. They usually seek to be liked, like folks to be pleasant, fear confrontation. So, you know, in terms of any types of confrontation, usually try to avoid it. And decisions are to be considered for this individual. And for folks that have a high energy preference for cool blue, usually appear to be formal, more conservative. Primary focus is problem solving, usually like folks to be correct and precise, and under pressure may seem withdrawn. And again, for them, a big piece of decisions must be logical and deliberate. So some other key concepts to look at in your surroundings and for yourself to be aware of some of those key attributes. So we have a question. This is, are we born with these preferences or are they developed through our environments? These are developed through your own experiences based off, you know, the insights, I would say. You know, it's a combination of experiences that you've had that form, you know, your own beliefs and your own preferences. And again, we all have a combination of all four. It's just our preferences are shaped through our own experiences and background that we've had. And the last thing is your understanding of these preferences is a fundamental way for us to be able to communicate and build strong relationships with others and really becoming an effective leader. All of us have had a chance to review our assessment profile. And in that assessment profile, you can use it to take keywords to utilize for your LinkedIn summary. I know a lot of folks have been able to take some keywords there. Sometimes it's easier for an assessment to tell you what your strengths are than for us to communicate and make, come up with those keywords on ourselves. So definitely leverage that. And then the other key concepts that is on there are this bar chart that you see here. And the bar chart, most of you should have been able to have that conversation with Mireya, so I won't spend, or I'm sorry, with Marlene. So I won't spend too much time on this. But basically, it's you being able to, your conscious on the left side is you being aware of this. Typically, you either are working on a project or are in a workplace role that you're consciously utilizing that color energy preference more than the others. Perhaps your role requires you to leverage more of that color energy preference versus the less conscious. It's more of when nobody's looking. So conscious is, let's say everybody's like, hey, let's take a group picture. You fix your hair, you move your necklace, you get ready. So you're aware that you're going to get a picture, so you want to look a certain way, right? You want to be prepared. Versus the less conscious, let's say you're sitting at a conference somewhere and you're listening to a speaker, and out of nowhere someone's taking a picture of you. You're not aware, you didn't prepare, and it's kind of who you are when nobody's looking type of deal. So both were taken from your evaluator, the 25-question evaluator. So it's a combination of both, but it just creates really that difference between the two. And the preference flow shows, one in the middle here, showcases how much energy is being exerted or not used on a daily basis, because perhaps this individual, the least preference that they have is utilizing their cool blue energy. They're just not comfortable with it. They don't prefer it. But for some reason or another, they're exerting that color energy. It's taking them a lot more energy to utilize that color preference because it's not their preference, if that makes any sense. So they're exerting a lot more energy on a day-to-day basis to utilize that cool blue. Perhaps it's a certain project at work that's having this individual crunch numbers, a strategy plan. So it's taking up a lot more energy. So this would change over time depending on any stress-related or any work situation that's requiring you to use or not use specific color energy preferences on a day-to-day basis. So I know this can be a bit confusing. So again, this is you as you prepare, as consciously you're aware, utilizing that color and energy preference versus the less conscious. And the preference flow is how much energy you're exerting to leverage that, because it may not be your top. Again, usually when it's your top, easier for to do or to behave or to leverage that color energy preference. When it's not our preferred, then it takes us a lot. So think of that as well. Questions on I think for the part where we have about 10 minutes or so. We good? Was anybody surprised on their color energy preferences as a result of their assessment? Any surprises? Any aha moments? You could type them up, or we can unmute you so you can share. No? Wait, one more minute. So we have Sophia who says, I did not expect this much blue energy. Why is that, Sophia, if you don't mind sharing? Perhaps is it your role at work that requires you to use more of a... Okay, are you on?
Yeah, I'm here. It has a lot to do with the role at work.
Okay.
Because it's very analytical, assessing, very systematic, and I think that's sort of been ingrained and cultured.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that it wasn't there initially. I just think it's been sort of elevated because it's in practice and in routine every day. Second nature now.
On both your conscious and... Okay. Thank you for sharing. Anybody else have anything to share? Alrighty. I'll move on so that we can wrap it up and just have a couple other tips for you, kind of a quick reference, so that if you have folks that you sense maybe fall under a specific color energy preference in the workplace or any of your relationships, here are some tips. So folks that that have a high energy preference for fiery red, you want to be brief. You want to have more of a high level approach and really focus on results. Folks with the sunshine yellow, you want to be enthusiastic. You want to be able to be expressive and imaginative. And folks with who have a high energy preference for earth green, you want to do more of a slower pace, take time, ask questions, and really be deliberate in your relationship and approach with those individuals. And then folks who have a high energy preference for cool blue, you want to ensure that you're sticking to business, being very specific. And we can share these slides as well with you to have as a reference point. And then the other one is this one, and I apologize, it's looking a little blurry now, but this one also shares some other type of styles, the focus, what are some concerns with folks that have a high energy preference for those, just to help you in your day-to-day working relationship. So again, we can send this over to you so that you can review. So I think we have about 9 minutes. I'll pass it over to Mireya to see if there are any questions. And before I do that, Mireya, I'm sorry, I just want to wrap up with the setting goals. At this point, you should have already received a couple worksheets that help you on setting up your SMART goals, but also looking at what your next couple of years look like for not only your professional goals, but your personal goals. So I strongly encourage you to take this valuable tool into practice and to really help you to achieve your targets for you as well. And to wrap up, I think, just you can read it here, but I'll read it as well. It's to be a leader, you must first see yourself as a leader. Based on what you've learned so far, you not only know what qualities are important, but you have to be able to prioritize them as how they apply to you, not only for you personally, but also in your surroundings and what applies for your goals as well. So thank you for joining us. And again, I'm happy to answer any other questions. If you have them, feel free to reach out to me or Mireya. So Mireya, I hand it over back to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Patricia. And as Patricia mentioned, this is typically a 3-hour workshop that we're cramming into less than an hour. So there's a lot of material that we didn't have time to cover. However, please review your workbook that has a lot of this information. And I will also be sending the PowerPoint that was used today for you guys to have. If you have any questions, please, for right now, please let me know so I can unmute your line. Otherwise, feel free to email me or Patricia. Patricia's email is patricia@HACE, that's HACE online.org. You can email her directly. Again, her email is patricia@HACE online.org. So I'm going to give you guys a few seconds to let me know if you have any questions. We can unmute your line, or you can type it in the chat box. Otherwise, you can also email us if it's more of a private matter or question. Okay, great. So I think people are logging off now. So thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to join us in this webinar. Again, the webinar has been recorded, so we will have that available, and I will be forwarding the PowerPoint that was used. Thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.